States of the Union. President Trump highlighted his administration's accomplishments in the actual State of the Union address, and we are great again. Our country has record low unemployment, especially for African Americans, Hispanics, and women, rising wages, and the highest percentage rise in the lower wage brackets seen in a decade. Home ownership is up, destroying global terrorists like ISIS Al-Baghdadi and the world's worst terrorist, Iranian Soleimani, and the highest U.S. optimism levels seen since the Reagan years. On the other side, in that other union, the Democrats can tout the destruction of Americans' confidence in our institutions, from the Crossfire Hurricane, confirmed illegal spying on a presidential campaign, the failed Mueller probe, the failed impeachment, and finally, the failed Iowa caucus. So strap in. This is the Rob Maness Show. President Trump highlighted his administration's accomplishments in the actual State of the Union, and yep, we're great again. Our country has record low unemployment, especially for African Americans, Hispanics, and women, rising wages, and the highest percentage rise in the lower wage brackets seen in a decade. Home ownership is up, destroying global terrorists like ISIS Al-Baghdadi and the world's worst, Iranian Soleimani, and the highest U.S. optimism levels seen since the Reagan years. On the other side, the Democrats can tout the destruction of Americans' confidence in our institutions, from things like Crossfire Hurricane, the confirmed illegal spying on a presidential campaign, the failed Mueller probe, the failed impeachment, and finally, the failed Iowa caucuses. I'm extra upset with the Democrats over Iowa because they ruined this great headline that I wrote. He's a communist. Bernie Sanders wins the Iowa caucuses, further solidifying the Democrat Party's radical departure from American values like individual liberty, limited government, private property, and guaranteed Republican forms of government in the states. Of course, some left-wing pundits took to Twitter and started the conspiracy theory that the Trump campaign and Russia might be colluding again in the failure of the Iowa Democrat team's app they developed for 3 years to count the votes. When I stopped laughing hysterically, I realized that Representative Adam Schiff could take this joke seriously and sic his House Intelligence Committee on the case, just like he did in the fake impeachment investigation. Oh my, that would be just great. Another fake investigation on Trump and Russia. How stupid can these people be? Very, apparently. The Democrat Party establishment appears to be rigging the election against Bernie Sanders again. First, we saw the Des Moines Register CNN poll release get canceled, then rule changes to allow billionaire Mike Bloomberg on the debate stage, and now this massive failure of the voting system being operated by the party. The political parties are the same. They will always act in their own interests, not in ours. All of this under the umbrella context that we've all been hand-wringing about digital disinformation interference in our elections by other countries, so it sounds like we need an intelligence community assessment looking at whether the Democrat Party is, quote, meddling, unquote, with our elections in nefarious ways. Remember, folks, we must always fight to keep the republic, and the best way to do that is educate your children on her most important values. Drew Berquist, former counterterrorism officer and host of the Drew Berquist Show on LifeZet TV, joins me to discuss this craziness. My friend Drew Berquist, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. Kind of a serious show, but has a lot of funny to go with it today. How are you doing, brother?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Rob.
Yeah, man, let's dive right into it. Okay.
Let's do it.
It's hilarious that the Democrats apparently have used an untested not cyber secure digital app to do the Iowa caucus vote counting. But there's some serious issues going on with that subject, especially when you bump it up against the president's State of the Union speech, where he highlights all of the great accomplishments, killing Soleimani, Al-Baghdadi from a national security perspective, putting the Iranians back into the deterrence box. We just fielded a 5-kiloton nuclear warhead onto sea-launched ballistic missiles to reestablish deterrence in the nuclear arena around the world, especially with these little bad guys like Iran. And the economy is going places that I haven't seen since I was a lot younger and better looking man. But this is really serious, what we're hearing about from this initial presidential election process out in Iowa, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you are still a good looking man. I've told you that twice, I think, now this week. So we're on a groove there. But I mean, I think what is hilarious about this, and it's one of those things that's funny and not funny all at the same time, right? I mean, you guys have had 4 years to figure this out and know that Iowa was coming up, and somehow over the course of those 4 years, you have still botched this first big piece of the election season, and it really is pretty damning. I mean, everyone out there saying it. These aren't my words. I'm not smart enough to come up with them. But are these really the people that you want running the country? That you want running your healthcare? All the different aspects of government that they would be in charge of. They couldn't even figure this out. So it looks pretty bad. Obviously, lots of question marks coming out about why this happened. Was someone behind this happening? All those sorts of questions, which I'm sure we can get into here, but definitely a very interesting turn of events last night and into today.
Well, let's get into from a national security perspective. We put a lot of time, resources, funding, and political debate into our elections cyber secure, especially since the Mueller report did confirm that the Russians as a nation had attempted to infiltrate with disinformation operations and hacking operations into the election cyber systems in 2016. But these guys really did use an insecure app that was untested and hadn't been run by like the Department of Homeland Security cyber operations guys or Cyber Command. I mean, you're kidding me, right?
Yeah, anyone. I mean, literally run it by anyone. But do some test runs, make sure it is secure. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of boxes that were unchecked going into this, and we're seeing the fallout of it now, and it's got to be eating up everyone in the DNC. Again, there's a lot of folks who thought that Bernie was going to win. Of course, the DNC doesn't want Bernie to win. So in some regards, maybe they're happy. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of mud on their face. You're coming off the impeachment trial going absolutely south. It backfired as we all predicted it would, and they just look like angry, vindictive people. And now it's the big show. It's the Iowa caucus, and it totally blows up in your face, and you can't even pronounce or announce a winner the first night because literally everything has gone wrong.
Well, I only asked this question halfway in jest, but it is somewhat of a joke. Will Representative Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Select Committee, initiate an investigation into the security of our elections and election meddling by the Democrat National Committee in Iowa to keep Bernie from winning or push their preferred candidate, which I don't think is Joe Biden. I believe it's Mayor Pete Buttigieg is the president of the United States calls him. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Schiff will. Schiff is concerned about Trump trying to sell Alaska to Russia now, apparently. That's his story this week as he wrapped up the trial there. But, I think you're right. I think that's definitely not Bernie that they want. I think that they have not wanted Biden for a while either. Whether it's Buttigieg, Warren, or one of the other candidates, Lord only knows. None of them are good for them or for America. None of them, I think, stand a reasonable shot to defeat President Trump. But yeah, I mean, this is it's just bad on all fronts. Again, you've got Sanders, who's jumped out to leads in a lot of the polls. We also know that polls don't mean a whole lot these days, but he's jumped ahead, so that has them scared. This goes wrong. It's really good political theater if you can sit back and look at it that way and take it in, it's very entertaining. I've gotten a kick out of it.
Yeah, I'm getting a kick out of it too. I'm also mad at these yahoos though, because they robbed me of a headline that I was going to run that night, and that it was, he's a communist. Bernie Sanders is a communist, and he just won Iowa in spite of the values that America stands for. Individual liberty, freedom, limited government, a free capitalist society, prosperity, all those things that Bernie philosophically has stood against his entire life, in and out of government, and most of it's been in government. He's an apparatchik, in my opinion. So I'm pissed at those guys. They need to get this fixed so we can see that Bernie actually won, and I can run with that headline and make sure the world knows that the Democrats are going to pick a known communist as their presidential nominee, quite likely. Don't you think?
I mean, with everything that we've seen as of late, that's where all the indications point. The question will be with him is he definitely has the following. He had a big following in 2016. I think that he could have made the race more interesting in 2016 if the Clintons and the DNC didn't get in his way. I think that people do fail, to your point. I mean, he calls himself a democratic socialist, but he's very clearly, if you look at it, a communist. He just uses a more soft term to describe himself. But the question is going to be, does the DNC get in the way? And will that young voting population that tends to cling to Bernie because he promises them free stuff, and there's no better way to get young kids than promising them free stuff, will they actually get up off their duff and go vote? The turnout's going to be, I think, a really important aspect of how successful the rest of his campaign is, both now during the primary season, and then if he were to become, if the DNC allows him to become the nominee, how it will play out then afterwards.
Yeah, on a serious note, Bernie's numbers that we were seeing were looking quite good, and I believe that's why the Des Moines Register and CNN poll that was withheld is because he looked so strong in that polling. And my educated guess is that, barring some nefarious machinations of numbers, he's going to come out on top on this Iowa caucus deal, and next week in New Hampshire, he's going to take New Hampshire. We already know that. So the Democratic Party has a real challenge when their message is that they're still the party of moderation and for the blue collar worker. When this guy, he's all about big government and spending every penny you got and every penny you don't have in order to get his payoff programs out there for the folks that support him. And unfortunately, as was said long ago, once the American people figure out that they can vote people in that will pay them a lot of money, they'll start doing it if they forget how their government works. And less than a third of our citizens actually know what the three branches of the United States government are in the Constitution these days. But on that note, do you really think that the Democratic National Committee and the establishment Democrats would really try to rig this election again after they got blatantly caught in 2016? And really, Bernie's really the only guy that could really challenge Trump, isn't he? In my mind, that would be an impressive face-off if they could do that.
Yeah, I think it is the only. I mean, I think a lot of the other candidates, I think Warren gets absolutely walked over and crushed. Buttigieg, I think, is intriguing to some. Obviously with his service and his youthful energy and this, that, and the other. But I think that also hurts him. He just doesn't have the experience. Biden steps all over himself. So in the end, Bernie has been, if nothing else, and Joe Rogan, got in all kinds of trouble, I guess it was a week or two ago, for endorsing him because he said, look, this guy's been consistent his whole life. And he has. I mean, you got to give him credit there. His ideas and policies are absolutely ridiculous, and almost none of them make sense and will drive our country into the ground. But he's been consistent about it. So I think it would be an interesting election. What I think people fail to see, though, is half of the policies and ideas that he's got and would put forth, they're so radical that even the DNC doesn't want them to happen. Most of the country doesn't want to happen. And by the way, they're not going to happen. You're not going to have in the system of checks and balances a government that, his ideas pass through everything. So getting back to your question, I think that they will try to do something to thwart that, because they don't want Bernie Sanders to be their candidate. They don't want Bernie Sanders to be possibly the president of the United States. But they're going to have to do it cautiously, because they still have mud all over their face from 2016. People are aware of it. Bernie and his people are still mad about it. So I think that they're going to have to play it cautiously, but at the same time, trying to make whatever efforts they can. We know it's reports and rumors right now, but the app that was made and controlled by former Clinton staffers, that was used in Iowa during the caucus there. So who knows what they're going to try and pull. If they want to stop them, they're going to have to do something, but they're going to have to do it smartly.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Pick the team that really messed up the Clinton campaign and lost it with their really bad candidate, of course, but the team didn't help her out at all in any way, when all you have to do is point to a couple of states like Michigan and Wisconsin where she chose not to go. And the team obviously probably drove that more than likely and advised her not to do that. And that's where she lost, was in those key states. And these guys coming in with their fancy app. Well, we've done it before. You can hear the consultants now. Yeah, we did it. We did great in Iowa last time. And here's how we're going to do it. And we'll take care of this for you. It's absolutely ridiculous. But,
well, and to your point earlier, you brought up cybersecurity and not testing it. You've got someone who is attached to literally maybe the worst, biggest miscreant there is on the planet when it comes to security and securing digital information in Clinton. So just a loss all the way around. Yeah,
but even more seriously, though, if the Democratic National Committee and the establishment in that party really want a centrist candidate, you would think that they would be encouraging folks to coalesce behind Amy Klobuchar. Buttigieg and Biden, I mean, they've all gone extreme left to get onto Bernie Sanders' policy positions so they can win and compete with him. But Klobuchar and Biden really are the two centrists that I would call them, and I use that term quite tongue-in-cheek. Right. But they're very left of center, but comparatively speaking, they're centrists in the party. And if they wanted to do that, you would think that they would be encouraging folks to get behind them, but that's not been happening. And I think it's just because they have a weak slate of candidates. They've changed the rules now, so Mike Bloomberg, with his billions of dollars, can pay his way onto the debate stage, and he did. So he'll be on the debate stage, and that guy, he's a leftist authoritarian. He does and has tried to take many thousands of people's guns that are law-abiding citizens across the United States with his various really left-wing anti-Second Amendment and anti-First Amendment and anti-freedom policies. I mean, heck, the guy even targeted Big Gulp Cokes in New York City. So he's not going to do well either, and they're going to have a tough time. But getting back to the security piece of this, what do you think? I mean, how can we allow this type of activity to occur from a governmental perspective, a national security perspective, after all of the gnashing of teeth and hand-wringing and scolding and lecturing about how the government under Trump hasn't taken the right steps to secure our elections, and they continue all these nasty investigations, as the president would call them, about him and colluding with the Russians and those kind of things. I mean, heck, maybe even China was behind the architecture on their app. You never know if the government hadn't had a chance to take a look at it, do you?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really difficult to overhaul that. First of all, as you've stated, I've stated on shows before, like this kind of election interference, this kind of corruption, all this stuff has been present for a long time. This is not new. So that's one thing for the people to remember. But second, any initiatives that are put forth always are going to get pushback from one side or the other, because it's going to have some, whether small or large, impact on how they go about their process. So, if you want to take away this piece, hey, we're going to go and fix this over here and tighten up security, and that's an area that provides a loophole for them to leverage, whether it's the Democrats, the Republicans, or whoever, you're going to get pushback again. And it's the same with any law in D.C. Everyone stands to win and lose on any given issue. And whether it makes sense or is better for the country or not, they're always going to put their own party, their own agenda first. And because of that, it's hard for these things to get fixed. And I think we've got a long, long road to go to fix our process, make it more secure, make it more trustworthy, where the American public actually buys, okay, that's what happened. I mean, if you think of it, in reality, we're not that far off from some of these third world countries, Afghanistan, et cetera, and the woes that they deal with in elections there. We've got a lot of those similar problems. We just put some lipstick on them and call them something else, but the same kind of stuff happens here.
It absolutely does, Drew, and I do appreciate you coming on and discussing this serious and also hilarious issue at the same time. I will just point out, by the way, that the Republican Party apparatus in the state of Iowa had 90% of their vote counted within an hour of the polls closing or the caucuses closing, and I believe Mr. Trump took over 97% of the vote, which was another record, to use a term that he likes to do, that's never happened for a sitting and incumbent Republican presidential candidate in the state of Iowa.
Yep, he had a good night. And you had Joe Walsh out there talking to a crowd who ended up chanting 4 more years for Trump. Well, he was trying to sell why they shouldn't vote for Trump, which was pretty remarkable too.
Absolutely. Well, we look forward to seeing what the challenges this faces for the Democrat Party and the country as a whole, because we all know the two establishments in the D.C. swamp, they look out for their own interests and they work together more than they work for us out here in the rest of America. Thanks, Drew.
You got it. Thank you.
Well, we want to thank Drew Perquist for joining us. It was a lighthearted show, but with a very, very serious set of issues underlying that lightheartedness. Until next week, when we'll see you on the Rob Maness Show.